What is up, guys? Alex from Creates here. Welcome back to another video. Today, we have a hopefully short and sweet video for you. Maybe it's a 2-minute Tuesday, even though it's not Tuesday, and it probably won't be 2 minutes. But today, I want to talk about my 5 main tips that I notice a lot of people either do, or don't go far enough, or try too hard with in their mixes that make their mixes fall flat and not speak as much as they could. Now, over on my website, I do mix feedback, where you can submit your song and get personalized mix feedback. And these are the tips that I find I'm giving a lot. So I decided I would just put these 5 tips into one video for you guys. Now, these are also in no particular order either. So first off is trying to make a perfect balance. What I find a lot of people are doing is they're trying to make a perfect balance and have every element heard the whole time. That's not actually what you want in mixing. You want to have things pop out of the mix in certain areas and sit back in other areas. You don't need everything to be heard at all times. You actually shouldn't have everything heard at all times, because then it just becomes boring and stagnant. You need things to come in and out and to be a forefront and a feature and then kind of go away and sit in the background. You need certain things that are more of a background element, that are there for weight or feeling, and just things you don't really notice, but if you muted them, you'd notice that they were gone. You do need elements like that, and you're not going to hear them perfectly. They're not going to be perfectly balanced in there, and just there is no such thing as a perfect balance, because there's always things going to be moving around and changing, and that's what makes a mix interesting. Number 2 is contrast, and this kind of goes along with the perfect balance, where you can't have everything be a perfect balance. You need contrast in your mixes. For something to sound big, other things need to sound small. And when you make certain things sound smaller, something else can grow in a certain section. This is the same with writing and actually the arrangement of the song itself. To have a chorus be big, you need the verse to be smaller, or for the chorus to drop down, you need it to drop down from something. Then when you start adding other elements in and the way that you perform the guitar, perform the drums, all that kind of stuff, you are making the dynamics of the song build and the writing build. The same thing happens in your mix. You need the contrast of smaller elements and bigger elements, smaller sections and bigger sections. And that is what brings the listener through the journey of the song. And that goes really well into number 3, which is guiding your listener. And when you're mixing, not everything is a perfect balance. Not everything has to be upfront. You have to guide the listener as a mixer into what do you want them to hear in certain sections. When there is a verse and it is a big vocal moment, you want them to hear the vocal. Then there's a lead guitar part, and that part is going to take over from the vocal. So that needs to occupy the same space in the mix, or a similar space, or the attention of the mix in that section. You can't have 3, 4, 5 different lead elements all happening at once, all being introduced at the same time. Your listener is going to get confused and be not really sure what to listen to at that moment. You can leave ear candy in there that's going to notice later upon repeat listens. But the main element, the thing that you want them to hear, you need to put that into their attention. You need to really shove it in their face when it happens, or make it obvious so that's what they're paying attention to. You can't have everything all up front and super clear. It just doesn't work. Our brains can't differentiate and can't pay attention to all of those different things at once. We can kind of do 2, maybe 3 different lead things at a time, but I wouldn't go much more than that. And be very selective when you're doing 3 elements at a time that are the main focus, and don't do it the whole song, or frankly, otherwise it's just exhausting to listen to. Basically, not everything has to be in focus the whole time. You, as a mixer, are guiding the listener through what you want them to hear at what point in the mix. And number 4 is pulling inspiration from other mixes. Don't copy them, but pull inspiration. When you're stuck, when you're not sure exactly what to do, how to build a transition, how to make a section hit harder than it should, listen to other songs. Listen to how they did it. Listen to the sonics of how they did it. Listen to how they used effects to bridge gaps between sections, how they used sound design or other effects to influence and make a section interesting. How did they build the second half of a verse or a chorus, or how did they drop it down? All those different things. Pay attention to how they did it, and then see how can you apply that to your mix. It doesn't even have to be from the same genre of music, frankly. Just listening to different things can give you very different inspiration. Now, I'm not saying go copy the plugins that they're using and the settings they're using and all that kind of stuff. Sure, use it as inspiration again, but those settings and those plugins are not necessarily, probably not at all, going to work on your mix. So take the inspiration of maybe a plugin chain you might not have thought of. Now see how that can apply to you and what their outcome was that you're hoping to get out of it for your outcome, and adjust accordingly. And finally, number 5 is creating more of a space in your mix. And what I mean by this is use the tools that we all have at our disposal and are frankly very simple to create a much more 3D sounding mix instead of just having everything up front all the time. First off, there is reverb, and using reverb, you can move an element further back into the 3D space, move it further away. Doesn't matter how loud it is, it will still sound further away. Next, you have panning. That's going to move it left and right. Everybody kind of knows that. But using reverb and panning together, you can move an element further back with reverb and then over a bit with the panning. You can see how you're starting to manipulate the 3D space. Now, that creates depth and width, but what about height? That is frankly where filters and EQ comes into play. Lower end or more low end brings it lower in the height of the mix, and high end brings it up above things. There's kind of a frequency spectrum that is the height of the mix. So essentially, in this 3D mix, you're using more high end or less high end to move something up or down in the height of the mix. You're using panning to manipulate the width of the element or put it in a different spot. And then you're using reverb to dictate how close or far away it is from the listener. Now, this is in addition to volume as well, but when you're mixing, start playing around with these elements and think about them more as moving things around in this 3D stage that you're building for the elements in your mix. And that is it. Those are my 5 main tips that I noticed with my mix feedback a lot of people need reminding of. That is it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got some inspiration or some reminders of things to do in your mixes to just add a little bit more life and interest into them. If you want some of my mix feedback and to give you more pointed advice on your projects and your style, then go to anacreates.ca/mixfeedback. The link is in the description below, and you can use the code HELLOFEEDBACK for your first mix for free to give it a try and see what I'm talking about. Anyway, I will see you in the next video. Until then, always be creating.